Welcome to the Rainbow Bull with Tim Volk from T. Volk & Company Consulting. In this podcast, Tim, a proud member of the LGBTQ community, discusses a range of topics around the 5 capitals of a flourishing family: human, intellectual, social, spiritual, and financial capital. Tim will use this framework as he and his guest experts delve into the secrets of the wealthy and how we might learn from them. So let's get started on this exciting adventure together. She's a journalist who works in the world of family offices and wealth management. She's the editor of Crane Currency, a publication for families managing generational wealth and legacies. She also writes about travel, food, entertainment, and finance. In fact, Tim Volk, your guest, Kristen Oliveri, has written about many different topics. Please introduce her so we can learn more.
Thank you, Patrice. I am so excited, you guys, to have Kristen on the show today. You're going to love talking with her. She is by far one of the most beautiful, charming people you'll ever meet. And we have so much fun together. We clown. We can't talk about everything we've done, but I would say that her experience and background in writing about wealth management, in particular about the ultra high net worth space or the area of super wealth, is remarkable. And her observations, I really am thrilled today to have her talk a little about her observations. And then we'll do another podcast about her personal passion of travel and food. So both of us share that. So we thought we'd kind of riff on that a little bit on another episode. So today, I thought what would be great is if, and her background is remarkable, but Kristen, I'd love to welcome you to the show, and thanks for being with us.
No, thank you, Tim. Nothing makes me more excited to talk to you.
Oh, so cool. What I maybe you should tell everybody how we met. This is I'm almost scared. Oh my God.
How many years ago? I don't know. Let's just say roughly a decade, maybe.
Oh, more? I don't know.
So picture this: Boston, the Museum of Fine Arts. We are at a benefit that I was invited to by our good industry friend, Steve Prestano. I was on the dance floor, I think with my college roommate. I somehow got her roped into an invite. And I feel like the next thing I know, someone was tapping me on the shoulder, which must have been Steve, and said, "You must meet Tim Volk. You two will love each other." And then literally the rest is history.
We started dancing. Didn't we just start dancing?
Of course we did.
And we drank a lot that night.
I'm sure we did.
Oh my God, we had so much. It was a great party.
It was really spectacular. I think it was the opening of that museum.
It was.
It was unreal.
And I don't even remember who else was there with us. There was a lot of industry people that we knew.
Yes. I just remember being very gussied up, and I think the invite was last minute for me, and it was just one of those kind of magical moments where you're in the right place at the right time.
I think it's fun that it was an unlikely event that we met, and then we just stayed tight since. And you grew up in Staten Island, so you're a New Yorker.
Yeah.
Italian, just like my husband. And I was fortunate. We were both fortunate enough to be invited to your wedding, and I think we've just really found a great way to connect. And I'm so glad we met that night. It was just so funny. So, tell me a little bit about tell us how you got into your career. Tell us your evolution. Tell me your story.
Yeah, it's a fun one to tell, I think. So I studied journalism in college, also English, lit, and drama and theater, which might not shock anybody. And I wanted to go into journalism, but my passion was lying within theater, travel, food, wine. And I thought I was going to go be one of these really prolific journalists who cover the arts, pretty much. And my main focus was to get a job in food. And when I came out of college, I was looking around, and it was sort of the era of 2006, 2007 was the era of the food journalist. I mean, the rise of a lot of publications, a lot of social media around it. Food Network was exploding. It was actually quite hard to get a job. And I couldn't find anything where I was going to be covering food. And I wound up getting an interview with an institutional investor. I interviewed for a number of different publications. They were looking for, entry level beat reporters covering different parts of finance. And I remember going in, telling my boyfriend at the time, who was a hedge fund manager, I said, I know nothing about finance. I've studied all these liberal arts things. And he's like, well, you'll be fine. See if anything makes sense. And if you're aligned, it'll work out. And I interviewed for a bunch of different publications, but the one that stuck was the wealth management publication that was called Private Asset Management. My boss, who is now a great friend of mine, who also came to my wedding, was interviewing me. And I was candid. I said, listen, I'm a really good journalist. I'm a reporter. I know how to write a well-structured story. I know how to interview people. I'm good at source development, but I don't know anything about this space. And it's a B2B business publication. So I'd imagine having that expertise would be important. And she said, listen, I can teach you that. It's about a personality fit in this space. And I think you've got the personality to work with people in the wealth management space. She said a lot of it is connected to sort of luxury and lifestyle and having long lunches. And I said, okay, sign me up. So there I went. And the evolution of a journalist career is kind of funny. I went from writing and then sort of falling into the event space to coming back to full on editing again. But I stayed within the wealth management family office space for now 17 years. And I think at one point a while back, someone said to me that there was only 10 journalists in the US that actually focused on the family office space. I have no idea if that stat is true today, but there aren't many people that have spent a lot of time in the trenches in that space. And I knew that I was kind of on to something with building out my career there. But like any career, things ebb and flow. And I had been writing for a publication, then I got sold to another organization and I went there. And then I somehow found my way back to institutional investor for the second time in my career, covering events. And I fell into it completely.
I didn't know that.
I was brought in to launch a family office, community publication / events business that was only high touch. So it was supposed to be these experiences, high touch dinners, etc. But it was supposed to be almost like a membership group. It did not last long. However, I met my husband. So everything in the world, you're there for a reason. And then everyone looked around and said, we like you. You've worked here twice in your career. We want your expertise. Would you be open to running our family office conferences? On the editorial side, of course, creating the event content, finding the right people to speak, yada, yada. And I really had no interest in that. It was just, that was my option at the time. I wanted to stay within wealth management, so I thought it made sense. And in that period of my career, I really had the chance to, if we want to call it business development or investor relations, I don't know, but I traveled all over the world meeting with family offices. And that was really cool. And I talked to them, and my only ask of them was, hey, can you come to a conference? So it wasn't like I was trying to necessarily sell them anything. So in a lot of ways, I was a safe haven for families, and they felt very comfortable talking to me, right? They'd tell me about their structure, or what their challenges are, or where they see the markets going. And over, mind you, a lot of long lunches, lots of cocktails, great parties. And I spent a great deal of time, obviously, traveling throughout the US, but in Europe. And as you mentioned, I'm Italian, so any chance to get back to Italy and the surrounding countries were great. And then I had 2 kids, and they're adorable and wonderful.
Lovely.
But that became a moment in my life when things were changing. And I thought, what do I really want to do with the next 10, 15 years of my life? What do I love doing? What am I good at? And it always came back to wealth management and family offices because of the relationships. But the thing that when I sort of meditated on it while I was on maternity leave with my second, it was that I like telling people stories. I'm fascinated by humans. I'm particularly fascinated by the people that make up the wealth management family office space. We've talked about this before, but everybody's some amazing Renaissance person that, sings opera on the side or something. I wanted to figure out what my impact could be in my profession. And I think what I came to was also, I have the ability to amplify others' voices. if that's an article, if that's a story that no one was getting, any attention to, if it's a connection between people that I wrote about you and I wrote about you, you two should know each other, and that helps them. So long-winded way of saying it came back to, it all sort of culminated in taking this job with Crane Currency, Crane Communications, which is a well-known family business. Everybody knows Crane's New York business, Crane's Chicago automotive news. They were launching a family office pub, and they were looking for an editor. And then the final thing I'll say about that, the kicker for me was that they also wanted to cover things like art, collectibles, lifestyle, luxury. And that is me in a nutshell. I've freelanced in that space my entire career. So I've meshed this family office space with this luxury space, if you will. I had a side hustle before that was a thing. They called it freelance. And this was the way to bring my two worlds together. And it just felt like the right place for me. So I sort of went full circle, started as a journalist, back to being an editor, all within 17 years in the wealth management space.
That's amazing. I think it's a great story. Each of our stories are unique, but to ourselves. But however, what I like, and I think that's interesting here, and which is why we're talking about it, is how much you've been able to observe families in a different role. So you're in a non-threatening role, you're objective because that's your journalism background, and you want to make an impact and difference by helping amplify those voices that you think should be heard. So I think that's one of the most powerful things you can do as a journalist. So I'm curious, because you and I started when we talked about the good and the bad of what you do in the industry and what you're witnessing, because I've broken this into, when we talk about the podcast, we talk about following Jay Hughes's concepts of the 5 capitals of the family. The financial capital is the basis, in his opinion, to support the human, the intellectual capital, the social capital, and the spiritual capital. The human capital is actually the people in the family. The intellectual capacity is just that, the brain power of the family members. The social capital is really what's the money for? What are we supposed to do? What do we want to do? The spiritual capital is, what is the value base that we have? What are the foundation that we have as a family and as a group that we want to pass on? And those usually extend into the family businesses, if they have family businesses like my family. Mm-hmm. And I think, what the industry does is it focuses on the financial capital, because that's how it gets paid and how we function as an industry on managing the money and making the money grow and work. But it really is the other 4 capitals that are really the more important part of the family that we know in order for them to flourish. And so how do we, what are some of your observations as your career's evolved about working in this space? Like, what are some of the thoughts that you have?
I have many. A couple of the things, I think I've seen this story arc play out, right, over 17 years. And I started with news things, right? What were the big things that people were talking about? And one of them, I think, which is a key theme, was this great transfer of wealth going to women, right? In the next couple of decades are happening now. And that was a big thing I started writing about at 21, 22 years old. Banks were talking about it. The advisors were talking about it. The family offices were trying to ready their female next gen. I wish I've seen more movement in that story arc.
Really?
I do. And I just want to see more women taking the lead. And there's a lot of education that needs to be there, but there needs to be this, a lot of it goes to succession, right? Like having the buy-ins of these patriarchs, matriarchs, people that are running the family businesses, the money, really incorporating their children, particularly the women, involved in the process, knowing what the business actually does, what a family office does, basic finances, ABCs, really understanding that piece to then have them, when all of a sudden one day there's this liquidity event or this money's being transferred to them, that they're not looking at everybody else, or they don't just, they've inherited some advisor that they hate, that there's no real relationship with, really getting them involved. I think that would be powerful. Wow. For me to see a little bit more of. I'd also love to see more female executives within the wealth management space, multifamily offices, banks, more. And then the other piece is diversity, inclusion, representation in general. It's a traditional industry. It always has been. And I know things are changing because they are. It's 2023. Things are changing. But seeing more representation, the next gen has to drive this, and they have to ask for it, and they have to be more vocal than everybody was before. And that is happening. And I think a piece of our world, technology, social media, whatever we want to call it, is driving that trend a little forward. Another thing I see, obviously, is this concept of like the traditional white glove family office. That's changing too. And people are saying, there was a time where family offices couldn't be found. So there was no website, there's no phone number, good luck in figuring out who actually runs it, who's the CIO. As a journalist, those are things I would be trying to, uncover, and they'd probably never go on the record, but even just to know about them. Right. And that's changing a little bit more as the next gen, as a more diverse family office professional takes over. I think some of them see the power in sharing their stories a bit more. And I think that's where the representation piece will happen. If we could push for that a bit more, or that's what I would like to see happen. But those are some of the key things or story arcs I've been seeing play out.
It's interesting because you and I've talked about the fact that I wrote a chapter for Barbara Hauser's book, The Family Office Journal. Production is by Global Law, and Barbara helped to coordinate it as an editor. And they asked me to write a chapter on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really about inclusion. I kind of think that the inclusion, I wish it led with inclusion, because I think when we say diversity right out of the gate, everybody thinks affirmative action, and they get there's this sort of
their backs are up immediately.
Right, their backs up. And I keep saying to people, wait, whoa. If you watch Crazy Rich Asians, look at Moonstruck. Look at any ethnic movie, the Big Fat Greek Wedding. Sure. What do you mean he's not Greek? Is the long stringy hair? I don't know. Is he a good boy? I don't know. Is he a good Greek boy? No, I don't know. And then in Crazy Rich Asians, I make lamb. You eat no meat.
I make lamb.
I love it. I mean, it's just the ethnicity issue. The inclusion in a family has been going on for millennia, for generations, right? My friends that are Jewish that married non-Jewish spouse, they were like, they're not Jewish. And they're like, no, they're still not Jewish.
Just no.
It's just nothing. It's like a blank.
Just no.
But I don't know, within the LGBTQ space, which is what they wanted me to write about. I've met lately more people that are coming out, although I just don't think there's a lot of people that are out in our space.
No, I mean, maybe I could think of 10, and that's sad. We just need that are actively out that I know that have involvement in top roles. But I think it's, the inclusion, we should change that around. I think that's what it's about. I mean,
don't you?
Yes.
How would you rank it? Inclusion, equity, and diversity?
I think so.
Yeah, that's what I think.
And it's funny because I know we're started talking the family office side, but from a wealth management perspective, a lot of these DEI programs are being slashed. Like if I hear this one more time that a large organization has slashed their DEI project, or they've gotten rid of the person that they hired, I mean, that's just a crime to me. But I think it's about framing the conversation in a different light. And if we just, I'll give you an example. I went to a conference, family office conference in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago, and there was a workshop. It was a women in wealth workshop, but talking about sort of women stepping up in the family business. But it was about imposter syndrome, right? And how do you deal with imposter syndrome. And they had all these exercises, and we got involved in little groups. And I mean, it was actually one of those wonderful moments. A woman who was a matriarch who lost her husband, and then her daughter's husband was ill, and these two women found themselves running a family office and family business when had no involvement prior. And she had immigrated from India. She had only been a caretaker in her home and not involved in the family office whatsoever, and was so nervous to even do these little exercises in groups. And by the end of that exercise, I told her, I said, don't worry, you're getting stressed out about it. Let's just chat. She told me her story. She was incredibly powerful, moving, thoughtful. We were crying and hugging at the same time at the end. But I mean, I expected that type of takeaway for me because I was there to have that sort of experience. But the bigger piece of it for me was when we were leaving, there was a couple of men in the room, and one of them was running the event. And after I left, I said, so what was your takeaway? And he goes, I was blown away. He's like, I can't wrap my head around imposter syndrome, like the concept of it. And he goes, and I have young daughters who are entering the workforce. And he was there to try to do the work. And I really appreciate it. And he was very candid and open about what he was saying. But it just showed a perspective of people that don't even ever understand what it's like to feel the way that most people feel. And that was a big moment for me. So that's why inclusion is so important. And sometimes people might scoff at a session like that at a conference because, like, here we are again, a diversity session or a women's session,
That's right.
what have you. But, let's get some other people in the room and get them to see what it feels like. It was really, really special moment.
There's a client that I had a year or so ago when I was with Axiom, wonderful clients, and big family. And the family had made clear that the sons, because it was a large family, had run the business, and the wives had not been involved. But in the estate planning, the attorneys are like, well, who do you trust? And of course, the brothers, they were all like, well, our wives, they should be the head of if something happens to me, they need to be the ones to step in. Well, trying to tell them after a lifetime of not being involved, anybody that we have, and I have another set of clients where we met with the family, and the husbands were told not to be involved. And then we had to tell them, you will be the head of the trusts in the stock in this big business. The husbands you will be in control of. And they're like, I've not been involved in this. I have no idea how to do this. Big event.
It defies logic.
And so all of a sudden, what I find odd is one is a bad level of communication. I think that families overlook the obvious, like they overlook the talent that's in the room. So I want to say that we don't have enough to see all voices at the table. I don't think the family's looking at everybody at the table. And it's very common for them to overlook the women. That's the more common, in my opinion, or the black sheep or the gay sheep, the rainbow sheep, hence the rainbow bull. But I think that we're faced with a time when it's becoming more and more important as an industry to not do that. And this concept of this good old boy has got to stop, because the demographics show by, I think, 2040, the white male will be the minority. And part of that is just the mixed marriages and the people's ethnicity. But if we did a 23andMe, I'm Italian. I'm not Italian, but I'm Scottish and German, I think. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if I had Italian in me, right? Like, you just don't know. And if you ever watched The Roots,
you feel Italian to me.
I know, right?
Also Irish and Scottish, but yes, you feel.
But you know
Italian
what I mean? Yeah.
Of course, we're all interconnected, right? It's
right. And so the thought that maybe this isn't, that there's some pure thing to this, I just don't think it's. And furthermore, the burden of the wealth, nobody's ever going to feel sorry for a wealthy family. They're just not. But the challenge that this creates is huge. And for a lot of the people that have to manage it, or I would have leadership roles, they didn't choose it. If you're a child or the next gen, you inherited it. You didn't choose this.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. Look, I know you're listening to the Rainbow Bull podcast, and I'm really happy you're here. But if you have any questions or issues you'd like to have us discuss with the experts, please email them to us at tim.volk@tvolkco.com. We would love to hear from you.
The psychology of wealth is fascinating to me. And I've written a lot about it. I've interviewed folks, and there's a big dynamic between either inherited wealth or wealth creation, right? It's just a completely different mindset. And there's a lot of guilt around inherited wealth that, money doesn't make anybody happy, as we all know. So there's a lot of stuff that comes, but with great money, you have great influence and you have the power and the ability to do good. So that's the plus side. But it doesn't mean anybody's asking for it or wants it, and they don't know what to do with it. And then, all the things you were just saying, people aren't prepared for it, right? They're like, we'll leave it to you one day, but like for the next 25 years, we're not going to tell you anything about it. So you're completely at a loss when it gets dropped in your lap. That's nuts. That defies logic to me. And I'm a very logical, you and I are both Libras, but very logical people. That's right. Just doesn't make sense. If you're going to give it to somebody someday, you need to be prepping them all the way through, or at least just giving them like, hey, just be the fly on the wall, be that reporter in the corner, just learn, observe, ask questions.
Give the opportunity to learn.
That's it.
Even pseudo control. What would you do if you were in control?
Right.
I don't think we think about the ability for families to actually push the decision-making down, not necessarily formally if they don't feel comfortable yet, but informally it could be done. What do you think? So okay, let's go through the good and bad, because you and I had a good and bad list. We started when we prepped. So the good things you said, the amazing impact families can have. Comments?
Yeah. I mean, America was built on family businesses that literally have changed our world. I think there's this nice intersection, or what I've seen anyway, is this intersection between philanthropy and investing, where people are putting their money into actual investments that will change the world. Mental health, cancer research, autism. Some of the stuff I've written about families I've talked to are unreal. How that private capital can really move the needle, right? You're looking in, we don't have to wait for a million clinical trials to get something done. Like private capital can help it move it forward. So to me, that's where the real power lies. Like, find out what the mission, the ethos is of the family, and then not just throughout your philanthropic efforts, but how can you actually make real change there? Is it impact investing? Is it direct investing? Depending on how we want to frame it, but it doesn't really matter. I think that's the real good, that some of these families are at the forefront of change. That's a big takeaway for me.
So the philanthropy piece, that means you and I have talked about the impact of philanthropy, and over time, I think a lot of the families don't get the credit for what they've done. I think right now there's this love-hate relationship with wealthy families. And and for some families, I think it's totally justified because they're not nice, or I don't think they see a responsibility of their wealth. Like, I don't believe that when you see the Housewives of Beverly Hills, or not that I'm going to berate the show, but I just don't know that that's really truly representative of what the families want, or what they want to be perceived as. I think most families of enormous wealth want to make a difference, want to make good in the world. The universities, education, the art, culture, music, symphony, opera, all the things that we have in this country are really driven by visionary people, right? Are there any surprises about this that you can think of in philanthropy that sort of took you back a little, or like either in a good way or in a bad way?
Oh, on philanthropy particularly. Or
private capital, like you said, that they're trying to do something.
I think I've written a lot about this intersection between philanthropy and impact investing, and some people have so many different definitions about impact. I see just so many commonalities. I think they're woven together, right? There's pieces of it that can all be taken into account. I think there's some families that I've talked to that are like, we're just an impact family, or like, we've aligned our portfolio completely to be impactful, which is really admirable. And then there are families that are like, we don't get into that. We don't think impact investing has any street cred. So we just do our very basic check writing or what have you. But it's like, let's broaden our thinking a little bit with the whole space. What can be done? There's so many different avenues of change that people can make. And that's a really good way. I think the thing I have seen, which is a good trend and has always been involved in some of the family dynamics, is they get the children, the next gen, involved in philanthropic efforts. Sometimes it's the way of dipping the toe in, right? That could be powerful, but and just really having the children, the next gen, sort of look through what's important to them. It might not be what their parents were supporting for years, or they might think about doing it in a more impact investing way, or maybe just something else completely. But philanthropy is very much embedded into the core of family offices, and I think there's a lot of good that could be done there. But
I think you're right. I said to one of the families, impact investing, I said, so if you invest in food bank and they feed people, isn't that having an impact that they actually have a meal or food? And they're like, well, yes. I said, so, but it's really you're impacting. Yeah. So, we have several friends that you and I both know that are focused in philanthropy. And I think one of the challenges they feel is that, one, the urgency of the need is always there. That the not-for-profit side of this doesn't get the top talent because it can't afford the top people who go to for-profit side. And then I think it helps to have the family find a shared passion that maybe it can help the family bind together more as a family if they can share the vision of their philanthropy together. Because I think there's a warmth in it. There's an amazing sense of accomplishment.
It could be the connective tissue of the family, right? Everybody wants, another piece of this conversation is the legacy, which we haven't even touched upon yet.
Yeah.
But philanthropy and just trying to figure out how to do good within the family, but also bonding over what's important to you is the real glue. So I think, that's the heart of it. It's the heart of the family. Which
leads us to legacy, which one of the bad things you and I had on our list was poor mentorship, development, training, getting the next gen in. And for example, women in what we've already talked about, the diversity or the inclusiveness of women and maybe the LGBTQ members of the family. So how do we do that? How do we help them think about legacy? Like if you were going to say something about it that maybe you weren't able to say it in the way you write about it, what would you say to people? Like how?
Well, if I was a next gen and I'm giving them advice, find a mentor, seek one out. Even in my career, I wish mentors were more readily available. I don't know if that's happening anymore, particularly now. Obviously, COVID's kind of screwed all of that up for things that are in person, out of person, not in person. But the role of mentorship is so important to everyone's personal development, career development, finding out what matters to them, having a sounding board. I think the big thing between women and the LGBTQ community is advocates, right? But a mentor could be your advocate. So I see all of those pieces being really important. We talked about it before, not readying people to take over the reins, but like maybe a mentor could help. And maybe that's not your parents or your colleague or whatever. It could be a mentor outside of an industry. I've had several mentors in my career that were sources of mine originally, right? People that I used to talk to in the space, and they taught me what wealth management was when I knew nothing about finance, and people that took me under their wing, invested in me as a person, got to know me personally, and they cared about what happened to me. And I'm still seeking mentors. I one that I consider a mentor now, a woman who's a partner at a MFO in Dallas, who I just adore. We had a meeting once and she gave me a book on her bookshelf, and it blew my mind. And we talked about leadership and sort of owning your own leadership and taking that next step in your career. And, I was in my early 30s when I met her. So you should always be seeking mentors. We could all continue. And also now I really could go on. What about the reverse mentor, right? For these patriarchs, matriarchs, maybe it's really just the patriarchs that kind of don't get where the next gen is coming from. Right. Maybe you partner with them. Maybe you learn a little bit about what's going on in marketing or social media or technology, something that's not necessarily your forte. And even if it's never for a goal for you to eventually do that thing, but understanding where their head's at, where business is today, what they can teach us that that vice versa. It's just the reverse mentorship thing, I think, is also really powerful.
I love that. Do we know, have you seen people doing this?
Not in an example in wealth management that I've seen a reverse mentor. It's pretty much I ripped it right out of the movie The Intern with Robert De Niro. And
I love that. I actually, but that movie was very, very poignant about that, because he became the reverse mentor for her.
Right. And they just helped each other. Right. It's powerful, I think.
Oh my gosh. I think this is something we should really write more about, because I also think that as you get older, you feel disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
Because in this country, not so much in other countries, but in the US, I think we also feel like we've left our elder behind. You feel like you're not relevant. And the people that I know that have stayed in business, that continue to work and are much more hip than those that don't, but they're still missing, I think, sometimes the younger energy that can come forth and say, hey, why don't you look at doing this? Why don't we look at doing that? And so there's a mutuality in that mentorship. I've actually, as you say that, Kristen, I've actually had the reverse mentoring going on at different times in my life. I never thought about it.
I think we should always constantly be learning, right? If we're not, then what's the point of even working anymore, right? We should be learning new things. And how do you do that? You expand. It's like having friends, right? You have to have friends for different reasons from different parts of your life. Same thing goes on in mentoring. And I think there is, like, technology from when I started, even me now, people are always like, oh, you're under 40, you know this thing. I was like, don't at all. Let's ask the person out of school, right? Technology has blown past me too. Like I'm not immune to that. But I also know what I don't know. And I'm going to raise my hand and ask for help, and going to the younger generation and saying, hey, can you explain these things to me? Because I really like to know. I care about it, even if it's not some task I'm executing on directly myself. And then I can understand a little bit more about where they're coming from. They can understand where I'm coming from. And and then if you put that sort of concept into wealth management or a family office or a family business, like, super powerful. And it doesn't have to be this overly thought out thing. It's just spending time with people and sharing with them what you're working on.
So I think what you're saying is we want this younger generation to actually seek out and say, let's partner with each other. You teach me, I teach you.
That would be my advice. Yeah.
So I want to hear your also thoughts on source, real journalism versus social media. And I can't even remember who I had a conversation with somebody the other day, one of the younger guys that I've been mentoring, and they were telling me how they get their news, and they only listen to TikTok or some strange news source that I've never heard of. And I'm like, do you understand how that's shaping your mind?
Horrifying.
I don't even know what to say. I don't even know how to. I really want to hear your thoughts on this.
I have so many. I believe in facts. I believe in thinking through a concept or a story angle and talking to multiple sources. That's the whole point, right? I think what's happened with social media, TikTok, whatever we want to talk about, whatever social media avenue it's being produced on, there's a lot of opinions. And listen, in journalism, that's called an editorial op-ed. There's a place for that. There's a place for someone to give their opinion, kind of like what we're doing now, right? Everything I'm saying is not fact, it's my opinion. But that doesn't float its way into a news story or a profile. And then there's things called checking facts. You talk to somebody and, you're asking them 3 questions, and then you might say, did I get that right? I wrote it down, or we videotaped it, but maybe I didn't really fully understand that concept. Mm-hmm. Let me go back and discuss it a little bit further so I could really wrap my head around it. There's a couple of things in journalism school that I learned that I don't know if it even exists today, but I'm not supposed to be the expert. I've now developed an expertise because I've covered an industry for so long, right? But my goal was to find the experts. I don't have to be the expert, which I think is a problem with a lot of news these days. Everybody wants the journalists want to be the talking heads, not, it's kind of the other way around. You're supposed to be finding the talking heads. And I think we need to figure out what, differentiate fact from opinion. I mean, that's kind of basic, but that's a big issue of what's going on today. Do
fact
people
from
get
opinion?
Yeah, I mean,
Differentiating, I agree.
And if it's an opinion, let's label it. This is an opinion. It's not.
And I think this is one of the challenges the families are facing. And it's sort of an unseen part of the challenge right now is image, how they're being perceived. And I think some of the younger generation in the families may perceive it a little different than the senior members of the family. And it may be good or maybe bad, but some of it is, again, part of the social media trap, which is not necessarily fact, right? I mean,
I've always said, and I think, maybe I'm sure people disagree with me. Social media is marketing, right? You and I both use it. I use it every time I post an article. If I'm, but I'm not taking pictures of myself at my worst day because I'm not. That's for me and my family, and that's private. But the things that I put on social media is a reflection of what I'm trying to put out in the world for my image, for my career. That's my goal. If I repost a news story or if I'm publishing something about a restaurant I ate at, etc., there's a thought process behind it, and it really has a marketing lens, right? That's it for me.
What it is, right?
And I think some people really don't get that. I've had conversations with people, family members, things like that. And I'm like, oh, but such and such posted this, so it has to be real. I'm sure there's a story behind it, right? There's a reason why people post things, and it's not always obvious to you. And that's how you have to take it. And I think the dangers of social media versus journalism, things are rooted in fact. We're talking to humans and telling their stories. You can't do that with a word limit on TikTok or Instagram. The other day I was trying to post about my birthday reflections, and there was a word count on Instagram. I was like, well, I had a little bit more to say about my reflections on my birthday. But the point is, it stops me because then it became less relevant because who's going to read that?
That's right.
And I will say, even in however long I've been working, unfortunately, there's a lot more of a focus on shorter news stories, briefs, catchy headlines. I mean, we've gone that way. The SEO takes over our world, right? What's the headline that's going to make somebody click versus what's the headline that brings the truest to the actual story. We're not doing that anymore. And to a degree, I have to do it too. I have to write catchy headlines. I get it. It's part of my job. But the thing that I do have control over is making sure I quote people correctly. I'm telling a story. I'm getting 3 or more people's views on a topic, so it doesn't come across one-sided. I'm not creating a ending before a beginning,
Yeah, that's right.
So I do think people are doing that out there. I think journalism it's at an inflection point because of social media and technology, but I don't think we're ever going to stop needing truth and people to tell the truth and people to think through content and present it to a wider audience. That'll still always be needed. A free press is what our country was built on.
Well, and I think that's part of what you do. I think that's one of the balance. And Crane's is pretty much a more fact-based publication group anyway.
Yeah, very much so.
So what's the final question? If I know we could talk for a long time, which we'll talk some more on our next podcast. What's game-changing next for you?
Oh, what's game-changing? And I wake up every morning able to do my job and have 2 kids seems pretty game-changing. I might be in the stage of my life where I'm trying to hang on. I am trying to do the thing that I love, which is meeting people, talking to interesting people like you, because our space is filled with people like you, and that's the coolest part about it. And then, balance a family around that. It's definitely harder than I ever would have imagined. I thought I prepared myself for it, but I hadn't because I'm in it. So for me, hanging on for the next couple of years, getting up and being able to put makeup on and doing my job is top priority. What's next for me in terms of the future? I want to find new people to spotlight. I mean, it kind of goes back to our conversation of inclusion. whose stories have I not heard? Because it is a small industry. And I think you kind of come around, oh, I know that person, or okay, that firm's doing this thing, and like same old, but what's new? What are people doing that's interesting that I haven't come across, and how can I bring those stories to light? So hopefully that answers your question.
Oh my gosh. I think it's so cool to see you where you are today, and to think it wasn't that long ago that you and I were having a cocktail and you invited Phil over to meet me, and I met him, and I looked at you and I looked at him and I said, oh no, this is it. I knew it was just so my dear friend, thank you. Patrice, did we cover, do you have any other thoughts that we should cover? Or
I think you've had some fantastic thoughts in there. I love the thing about the family bonding through philanthropy. Never thought of it that way, but that could be something that heals many rifts, I suppose.
And I think anybody can do it. I mean, anybody can do it.
Definitely.
Even for the holidays, taking your kids down to the food bank or the
volunteer.
You don't have to have a lot of money to give. It can be your time.
It's true. Time is more valuable than money.
And I think, Kristen, there's so much to talk about. There's going to be more we do talk about, and maybe our listeners will ask questions and reach out and ask more things for us to talk about. But
which brings up the next question. How can people reach you?
On Instagram at Chris Oliveri, and then on LinkedIn at Kristen Oliveri, and Third Crane Currency. So we have a LinkedIn page that's pretty popular, and we're trying to grow that. So that's also a place people can reach me.
Tim?
And of course, you can call me or email me at tim.volk@tvolco.com, or make sure you follow us on our Instagram with the Rainbow Bull. And I look forward to hearing people share their thoughts. And also, if you have questions or want us to cover a topic, please let me know. We really appreciate you listening, and if I'm here for you.
All right, everybody, you heard him. Follow the podcast. Don't miss any episodes. Be sure to share with friends and colleagues as well. And as Tim said, thanks for being with us. Thank you for listening to the Rainbow Bull Podcast. Visit our website at www.tvolco.com or give us a call at 312-636-5855. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of T. Volk and Company Consulting. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.